She was 12 years old when the thought first entered her mind, and it arrived quietly without drama or confidence, and without any idea that it would matter to anyone beyond the walls of her home. Her name was Lena, and she lived in a small town where people knew each other by routine rather than friendship, and where days passed slowly without surprises or change. The house where she lived had thin walls and creaking floors, and a feeling of age that showed in every corner, from the faded curtains to the chipped door frames. Her mother had been ill for years, and the illness had reshaped their life in ways Lena never spoke about, but always felt. Mornings were careful and slow, and nights were often silent. Except for the soft sound of breathing from the bedroom, Lena learned early how to move gently through the house, and how to listen more than she spoke. After school each day, she returned home quickly, not because she loved rushing, but because she wanted to be near her mother. She dropped her bag near the door and washed her hands and went straight to the living room where her mother usually rested. Some days her mother smiled and asked questions, and tried to sound interested in stories about school. Other days, she simply held Lena's hand and closed her eyes. Lena accepted both kinds of days without complaint, because she did not know any other way. In the corner of the living room stood an old piano that had not been played in years. It was upright and dark, with worn edges and keys that had turned yellow over time. The piano had belonged to her grandmother, who had played often when Lena was very young. Back then, Lena would sit on the floor and listen to sounds that filled the room with warmth and movement. After her grandmother passed away, the piano slowly became silent, and eventually it turned into just another piece of furniture. Lena stopped touching it, and her mother stopped asking about it, and life moved on in quiet ways. School became more demanding, and Lena's thoughts became heavier. As she grew older, she noticed things other children did not notice, like how tired her mother looked even after sleeping, or how the house felt emptier even when both of them were there. She noticed the way her mother sometimes stared at nothing with a distant expression that scared Lena more than words ever could. One evening, the air felt heavy, and the sun was already low when Lena came home. Her mother was resting on the couch, and the room was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator. Lena sat beside her and held her hand, as she often did after a long moment. Her mother sighed and said softly that she missed music. She said music used to help her feel strong even when everything else felt uncertain. The words stayed in the air longer than Lena expected. Lena looked toward the piano without realizing she was doing it. She felt a strange pressure in her chest, like something important was being asked of her without planning it. She said that she could try to play. Her voice sounded small and unsure even to her own ears. Her mother opened her eyes and looked surprised and then gently curious. She asked Lena if she remembered how to play. Lena did not answer immediately, because she truly did not know. She had not touched the piano in years, and had never learned properly, but something inside her insisted that trying mattered more than knowing. She stood up slowly and walked across the room, feeling her heart beat louder with every step. She sat on the bench and placed her hands above the keys. For a moment she hesitated, not because of fear of failure, fear of disappointing her mother. Then she pressed a single key. The sound was soft and imperfect, but it filled the room in a way silence never could. Her mother watched without speaking. Lena pressed another key, and then another, letting her fingers move without rules or plans. The notes were uneven but honest, and they carried something real. As she played, she stopped thinking about how it sounded and focused instead on how it felt. Her breathing slowed, and her shoulders relaxed. She felt as if something she had been holding inside for years was finally being released. When she stopped, she expected her mother to say something, but instead her mother was crying quietly. Lena panicked and thought she had done something wrong, but her mother reached for her hand and said thank you in a voice full of emotion. She said the music reminded her that beauty still existed even in hard moments. Lena did not fully understand what had just happened, but she knew something had changed. That night, after her mother fell asleep, Lena returned. Piano alone, she pressed keys again and again, listening carefully and trying to remember the sounds. She stayed there longer than she meant to, until her fingers felt tired from that night on. She played every day. Sometimes her mother listened, and sometimes she slept, but Lena played anyway. She played because it made the house feel alive again. She played because it made her feel useful and connected and hopeful. She did not tell anyone else about it, and she did not think of it as talent. To her it was simple way to give something back to the person who had given her everything. She did not know that others would one day hear her. She did not know that her simple act would grow into something unexpected at that moment. She only knew that pressing those keys for her mother felt like the right thing to do. If any dots or ellipses appear, rewrite the content. Without them, the days that followed took on a new shape without Lena fully realizing it. Each afternoon, she returned home with a quiet sense of purpose that she had never felt before. Her school bag still landed near the door, and the house still smelled the same. But something inside her felt different. She went to the piano almost without thinking, as if her body remembered what her mind had forgotten. Her fingers moved slowly at first, repeating the same simple patterns she had discovered the night before. She listened closely to every sound, adjusting her hands until the notes felt right to her ears. Her mother noticed the change before Lena did. She began asking gently if Lena would play again, even on days when she felt weak. Sometimes she listened with her eyes closed, and sometimes she watched Lena's hands move across the keys. On those days, the house felt warmer and less heavy. Lena began to notice how music affected her mother. Her breathing became calmer, and the tension in her face softened. Even on difficult days, the music seemed to reach her in ways medicine could not. Lena did not talk about this at school, and she did not practice in front of anyone else. She treated the piano time as something private and almost sacred. Late at night, she searched through old boxes and found worn music books that belonged to her grandmother. She could not read the notes properly, but she studied the pages carefully. She matched sounds to shapes and patterns, learning slowly through trial and patience. Mistakes were frequent, But she did not mind them. Each wrong note taught her something new. Her fingers grew stronger and more confident, and her ears sharper. One evening, a neighbor stopped by unexpectedly and heard the music through the open window. They paused outside, unsure whether to interrupt. When Lena finished, they knocked and smiled, saying they had not known anyone still played that piano. Lena felt shy and nodded without knowing what to say. Word spread quietly without her permission. A teacher from her school heard about it and asked if Lena played regularly. She shrugged and said she only played for her mother. The teacher suggested she consider joining the school music club. Lena did not answer right away. The idea felt too big and too public at home. She mentioned it to her mother, expecting hesitation. Instead, her mother smiled and said music was meant to be shared. She said Lena did not have to say yes now, but she should not hide what brought light into the world. That night, Lena sat at the piano longer than usual. She played until the sounds blended into something smooth and steady. She realized that what began as a small promise to her mother was becoming something more, not because she wanted attention or praise, but because the music itself wanted to move forward. She did not yet know where it would lead, but she felt ready to follow it. As weeks passed, the rhythm of Lena's life slowly changed, and the change felt natural rather than forced. She continued playing every day, not because anyone reminded her, but because her hands seemed to ask for the piano on their own. Her mother grew more alert during those sessions, and sometimes even hummed along softly. Lena noticed that the music no longer felt random, and her fingers began to remember patterns and movements. She started waking up earlier in the mornings just to practice before school. The house was quiet at that hour, and the sounds felt personal and calm. At school, her teacher kept encouraging her to join the music club, and this time Lena listened more closely. She attended one meeting, standing quietly at the back of the room, watching other students play. Some played confidently, while others struggled and laughed at their mistakes. Lena realized that everyone there loved music in their own way. She signed up without telling anyone except her mother. Her first day playing in front of others made her hands shake. She pressed the keys carefully, afraid of sounding foolish. But when she finished, no one laughed. Instead, there was a moment of silence, followed by gentle applause. That moment stayed with her longer than she expected. At home, her mother hugged her and said she was proud. The word proud settled deep in Lena's heart. From then on, Lena practiced with more focus and intention. She asked questions, learned from others, and slowly improved. She still played most often for her mother because that was where it all began. But now the music carried something larger than just comfort. It carried belief and quiet strength. Lena did not yet know how far her talent could reach. She only knew that she no longer felt invisible. And for the first time, she felt that her voice, even without words, could be heard. By the time spring arrived, Lena no longer questioned whether the piano belonged in her life. It had become part of her daily rhythm, like breathing or walking. Her fingers moved with more certainty, and her ears caught mistakes. Before anyone else could she practice, not to impress others, but to understand the feeling behind each sound. Her mother listened whenever she could, and those moments became the center of their days. Sometimes neighbors paused outside again, and this time they stayed to listen. They spoke softly afterward and told her mother that the music filled the street with warmth. Lena felt shy hearing those words, but her mother squeezed her hand with quiet pride. At school, the music club began preparing for a small local event meant for families and teachers. Nothing big and nothing formal, just a simple gathering. The teacher asked if Lena would consider playing something short. Her first instinct was to say no. The idea of playing without her mother beside her felt wrong. She went home that day carrying the question in silence. That evening, her mother noticed the weight in her posture and asked, "Was wrong?" When Lena explained, her mother listened carefully and then smiled gently. She said Lena did not have to play for anyone else unless she wanted to, but she also said that sometimes sharing something beautiful was a way of honoring where it came from. Those words stayed with Lena through the night. She sat at the piano long after the house grew quiet and played slowly. She imagined her grandmother, her mother, and herself connected by the same sounds. The next day, she told the teacher she would play. The decision felt heavy but also right. She chose a simple piece she had shaped on her own, not perfect and not complex, but honest. As the day of the event approached, Lena practiced with calm focus. She was still nervous, but fear no longer controlled her hands. She knew now that the music did not belong to fear, it belonged to love and memory. And the courage to try. The day of the small event arrived quietly and without ceremony. The school hall was filled with soft voices and the sound of chairs moving across the floor. Parents, teachers, and students gathered with relaxed expressions, expecting nothing more than a pleasant afternoon. Lena sat near the piano with her hands resting in her lap, feeling her heartbeat steady but strong. She searched the room for her mother and found her sitting near the front, wrapped in a light sweater. Their eyes met, and her mother gave a small nod that said everything. When Lena stood and walked toward the piano, the room slowly became still. She sat down, took a breath, and placed her fingers on the keys. For a brief moment, she thought about turning back, but then she remembered why she started. She pressed the first key and let the sound guide her. The music moved gently, filling the space with warmth and sincerity. There were no sharp notes and no rush, only a steady flow of feeling. As she played, she forgot about the room and the people. She played the way she always had, for her mother, with honesty and care. When the final sound faded, there was silence. Then applause rose, not loud, but full and real. Lena stood feeling surprised by how calm she felt. Her teacher smiled with quiet admiration, and several parents whispered in awe. Her mother wiped her eyes, smiling wider than Lena had seen in years. After the event, people approached Lena asking where she learned to play. She answered simply that she learned at home. That answer seemed to surprise them more than the music. From that day on, Lena was invited to play at other small gatherings. She accepted some and declined others, always choosing carefully. She never wanted the piano to Become something heavy at home, the music continued to be their shared space. Her mother listened and rested, and sometimes laughed again. The illness did not disappear. But its weight seemed lighter. Lena understood then that talent did not always arrive loudly sometimes. It entered quietly through love and stayed. Because it mattered. As summer approached, the invitations became more frequent and harder to ignore. Small community events, local gatherings, and quiet celebrations all asked the same gentle question: would Lena be willing to play? She felt torn because she never wanted the music to drift too far from its beginning. She talked with her mother about every request, and together they chose what felt right. Some days her mother was too tired to attend, and on those days Lena declined without regret. Other days her mother insisted she go, saying the music deserved to be heard. Each performance brought new faces and new reactions. People were often surprised by how calm Lena appeared. They expected nervousness or hesitation, but instead they saw focus and sincerity. After one event, a local music instructor approached her teacher and asked about Lena. The instructor had listened quietly and sensed something rare: not technical perfection, but emotional clarity. They offered to give Lena proper lessons at no cost. When Lena heard this, she felt overwhelmed and unsure. The piano had always been hers in a personal way. Formal lessons felt like a step into an unknown world. That evening, she played for her mother and for about the offer. Her mother listened carefully and then said something Lena would never forget. She said learning more did not mean losing what was already true. She said growth did not erase roots, it strengthened them. With that reassurance, Lena agreed to try. The first lesson was challenging and humbling. She realized how much she did not know and how much there was to learn, yet she also realized that her instincts had been guiding her well. The instructor encouraged her not to change her style, but to refine it. Week by week, Lena grew more confident and skilled. But no matter how much she learned, she always returned to the same place: the living room, the old piano, and her mother listening nearby. That remained the heart of everything. She understood then that her talent was not something she owned, it was something she carried forward with care. As time moved forward, Lena balanced two worlds that slowly began to overlap. One world was structured with lessons, schedules, and careful practice guided by instruction. The other world remained soft, familiar, and deeply personal. Inside her home, she never allowed one to replace the other. Her instructor noticed this balance and respected it. They encouraged discipline, but never pushed performance as a goal. Instead, they focused on helping Lena express what she already felt at home. Her mother listened whenever she could, and even on weaker days, she asked Lena to play quietly. The music became a form of conversation between them. When words felt tiring, there were moments her mother's health declined sharply. On those days, Lena stayed home and played softly through the afternoon. She noticed how the music steadied her own emotions as much as it comforted her mother. One evening, her mother asked Lena why she always chose to play such gentle pieces. Lena thought for a moment and said it was because loud sounds felt like they demanded attention. She said she preferred music that invited people in instead. Her mother smiled and said that was why people listened. As Lena continued learning, her name slowly became known beyond the small community. Nothing sudden and nothing dramatic, just quiet recognition passed from one person to another. A local event organizer suggested a larger gathering in a nearby town. The idea frightened Lena because it felt like a step away from safety. She hesitated longer than usual and spent days thinking. In the end, she agreed on one condition: that her mother could attend. The day of the event was tiring for her mother, but she insisted. When Lena played that day, she felt something shift. The room was larger and the faces unfamiliar, yet the feeling behind the music remained the same. People listened with full attention, and some were visibly moved afterward. Several strangers thanked Lena not for her skill, but for how the music made them feel. That was when Lena realized something important: her talent was not about surprise or expectation, it was about connection. And that connection had begun the first time she sat beside her mother and pressed a single key. With each passing month, Lena became more aware of how deeply music had woven itself into her identity. It was no longer just something she did, but something that shaped how she understood the world. She noticed emotions more clearly in others and listened more carefully when people spoke. Her instructor often remarked on her sensitivity and told her it could not be taught. At home, her mother began to talk more about the past. She shared memories of her own childhood and of Lena's grandmother playing the same piano. These stories gave Lena a sense of belonging that stretched beyond her own experience. There were days when her mother felt stronger, and those days were filled with conversation and quiet laughter. There were also days when her mother grew weaker and spoke very little. On those days, Lena played without being asked. She played softly and steadily, letting the music carry what words could not. One evening, her mother asked Lena if she ever thought about playing for larger audiences. Lena answered honestly that she thought about it, but it scared her. Her mother held her hand and said fear was not a sign to stop. She said fear often appeared when something mattered deeply. Those words stayed with Lena. As she continued to grow and learn, an opportunity arrived that felt different from the others. A regional youth showcase invited young performers from several towns. It was larger than anything Lena had faced before. She hesitated again, but this time she did not say no. She prepared carefully, practicing with intention and rest. Her instructor guided her, but never pressured her. The night before the event, Lena sat at the piano long after everyone slept. She played slowly, thinking about how everything began. She realized she was no longer playing only for her mother, she was carrying her story forward. When she finally rested, she felt calm. Whatever happened next, she knew she was ready to listen and respond with honesty. The day of the regional showcase arrived with early light and a quiet sense of importance. Lena woke before her alarm and sat still for a moment, listening to the house. Her mother was already awake and waiting with a calm smile that eased Lena's nerves. They traveled together And the journey felt longer than usual, but not heavy. The venue was larger than any place Lena had played before, and filled with unfamiliar faces. Young performers warmed up in corners, and soft sounds echoed through the space. Lena stayed close to her mother, and focused on breathing steadily. When her name was called, she felt a brief wave of fear. Then a deep calm. She walked to the piano and sat down. Just as she had so many times at home, the room grew quiet, and she pressed the first key with care. The music unfolded naturally, guided by feeling rather than thought. She did not rush, and she did not hold back. She played with the same intention she always had. As the final sound faded, the silence felt full rather than empty. Then applause rose strong and sustained. Lena stood slowly and looked toward her mother, who was crying openly. In that moment, Lena understood that this was never about recognition. It was about honoring love through sound. After the performance, people approached her with words of admiration and gratitude. Some asked about training and others asked about inspiration. She answered simply and honestly without embellishment. Judges spoke with her teacher and expressed surprise at her emotional depth. They mentioned opportunities that could follow. Lena listened politely, but remained grounded. That evening at home, she played again for her mother, just as she always had. Nothing about the music changed. She realized then that success did not mean leaving behind where she started. It meant carrying it forward with care and humility. Life did not suddenly become perfect after that day, and Lena never expected it to. Opportunities appeared slowly and thoughtfully rather than all at once. She continued her lessons and her schooling and her quiet routines at home. Her mother's health continued to change, sometimes improving and sometimes weakening. Through every shift, the piano remained a constant presence. Lena played on joyful days and on heavy days without distinction. The music became a record of their shared time together. There came a morning when her mother was too weak to sit in the living room. Lena brought the bench closer to the bedroom and played softly nearby. Her mother listened with her eyes closed and a peaceful expression on her face. When the music ended, her mother squeezed Lena's hand and whispered that she was proud. Those words stayed with Lena long after that moment passed. In time, Lena did move forward into larger spaces and broader stages, but she never chased attention or praise. She chose paths that allowed her to remain honest and grounded. People often spoke about her talent and asked where it came from. She always answered the same way. She said it came from love. And from listening. Years later, when people heard her play, they still felt something rare, not surprise, but connection. They felt the quiet strength of a girl who once sat beside her mother and played, not to be heard, but to give comforts. Give comforts.